I like my job, and I've been a mental health nurse for it's more than 40 years, so I'm not going to give my age away. September last year, I was walking my dog and she happened to pick a fight with another dog. During that fight, I intervened and I was bitten by either of the dogs, I don't know which. As a consequence of that, I contracted sepsis with quite a virulent bacteria. Essentially went into shock, lots of organ failure, and the result of all that is what they call a quad amputation. All of my life I've been very independent. I never felt as if I'd lose it. I always just thought, and I still do, it's something you're constantly working towards. My wife's the gardener, not me. I used to do the heavy jobs. You know, the carer thing is quite important. I think the big thing for Anne has always been, if I know the help's there and how to access it, then that makes me feel better already. When I was considered to be medically fit, before I was actually discharged, this rather nice man called Nadeem turned up, and he explained that he was the hospital social worker. He explained the concepts of social care. As soon as we started the assessment, it was obvious that we were also going in a direction.
What makes me proud about working within the hospital setting is having the opportunity to work with hospital OTs, physiotherapists, doctors, working with the individual to meet that individual's need collectively. Crucially, the individual is the heart of the work that we do.
The right services were put in place in a very caring way. Nadeem was the hub. Essentially, it did feel like a joined-up approach.
I think Julian naturally is a confident man, and I think it was about trying to ensure that we harness that positivity that Julian has. The strategy offers us opportunity to work with individuals around their needs and promote their confidence and independence, and allows them structure and control to think about the services that they want and how they want to live independently within the community.
All the services that I need have been provided and I feel well cared for. The difference that adult social care has made is the difference between being in an institution and being miserable and being at home and being happy.
My life was a bit of a struggle. I've always wanted to do things like be out and about, meeting new people. Basically, my head was all over the place.
I started working with Shane in May 2017. His social worker in the transitions team referred him to the Knots Enabling Service. I know that Knots Enabling Service have changed Shane's pathway for the better. His social worker told me that he was planning to commission 2 days of day services for Shane. And now what we have is someone who's happy with their life, working hard, getting paid, and for those other 5 days a week not being bored, sat at home.
Ever since me and Aidan have been talking, ever since I've called him my brother, he's shown me some good skills, he's a nice lad. I can't have no one better than him, because he's quality.
I quickly found out that Shane was very good with people and his social skills were great. He always makes me laugh. He wanted to do some gardening and also he wanted to help people, which is why he did some volunteering at the community gardens. I increase a person's confidence by focusing on what strengths they do have, because I believe if you focus on things that interest someone, you're likely to get the best out of them.
I have the confidence to actually do something now in my life.
I'm proud that I've enabled someone to be able to do those things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do before or believe that they could do. And I think that sums up what the Knots Enabling Service is about. We've changed someone's life for the better and actually made him more independent.
My passion is basically birds of prey. The best of all are my peregrines. everything you've got is all based on a bond. If you haven't got that bond, you haven't got anything worth having. When I got told that I'd got dementia, I was told that it would gradually get worse, so it meant I had to get rid of my car. I got rid of quite a few of my Falcons and what have you. Hardly anybody ever rings me up about Falcons at all, see. You can't expect it to go on forever, but anyway, it's finished with now. Mary and myself do everything that we can. We help one another. So we've said at times we'll have to have some help.
As an occupational therapist, I try to promote a person's independence. I always start off with a person-centred approach because we just want the best for the person. So I think that's quite a good thing as a therapist, to work in a team that do actually promote that. When George initially came home from hospital, he did state that outdoor mobility was one of his goals.
I'd been in the house for a long time and I was quite pleased to be able to get out and have a walk. I says, I haven't been out for weeks.
From the very young age, when I was a child, I used to idealize my father. He was very fit and athletic, and he was a police officer, so he used to do exercise every day. I used to think, oh, one day I'm going to be like him. So keeping myself healthy and fit, that meant a lot for me. I contacted Nottinghamshire County Council Adult Access Service because it was recommended by my friend.
People normally get in contact by phoning the customer service centre. Information's gathered, then it's passed through to the Adult Access Service, who will then call back, have a conversation and establish the best way to assess somebody. Seema was invited to our clinic. She was very nervous, didn't know anything about equipment, and unfortunately she'd lost confidence trying to access her bathing facility. She stopped taking care of herself because she was scared.
Jane made me feel so valued because she was listening to me, and she was very good in picking where I was struggling, and she just focused on that.
I love my job. Helping people do their everyday living tasks, getting into your bathing facility. We take it for granted every day that, you know, it's easy to do, and seeing someone with a big smile on their face once they've tried a simple piece of equipment that is going to give them that independence to get back is such a big achievement for both that person and for myself.
Without Jane, I would not have known that I can help myself. It changed my whole view of care and how I can make myself independent.
Originally, she was maybe thinking of carers, but with the simple provision of the shower board, it has promoted her independence, made the person happy and their life bearable again.
All my life, I've liked to be with people. I used to work for British Home Stores. Used to be head cashier and, in charge of office there. I think that still rubbed off on me here because I have to talk to everybody and interfere. My husband died when we were both 52, he had a heart attack. So I'd always looked after myself. And then I got to a time when all of a sudden it wasn't easy.
We received a referral for Jean. She was at Berry Hill Care Home. She was self-funding her care, and then she went below the threshold. We said, Jean, we're going to give you choice and control over your well-being and welfare. We want to see what you can do and how we can support you. We need to be creative. We need to think out of the box to say, what will make this person live longer, be more independent.
Once you start encouraging and promoting that independence, you see them starting to do more things for themselves. They've been amazed that there's this sort of facility to come to, because they never wanted really to go into care deep down. They just didn't think there was any other choice. But they've really blossomed, haven't they, and become independent and wanted to be back in the community with the correct support.
Chelsea and Victoria, from the beginning, have really understood me. She talks to me like a person, makes me feel better, because that gives me confidence that I think, oh, you've still got a mind of your own.
The ethos of the short-term independent service fits in really well with being an OT and what our role is all about. We obviously want to help people live the life that they want to live and just to improve their health and well-being.
I really love my job because it has proven that people, they can be re-enabled, they can take control, they can be fully independent. This short-term independent service, that's the way forward.
Hello, my name is Michael and I come to High Oakham Primary School, and my daddy is a police officer and I like it when Joe Wicks is Scooby-Doo. Hi, my name is Lucy. Hi, my name is William and we go to High Oakham Primary School. And I like playing with the marbles one. I like playing on the field with my friends. And my daddy works at the police. My mummy is a teacher.
Hi, I am Joshua and I go to High Oakham Primary School and my dad is a key worker and my mum works for Boots and I love the field. Whoa.
Hello, I'm Charlotte and my parents both work for Nottinghamshire Police. My favourite thing that I've done at school so far is rounders.
Hi, I'm Leo and my mummy and daddy work for the ambulance services paramedics. They take people to A&E when they've had an accident. I have been at school recently and my favourite thing has been weaving Eye of God.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Anthony May, the Chief Executive of the County Council here. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Jason Zadrozny and Councillor David Martin as attending as a substitute.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief Executive. Item 3 then, declarations of interest by members and officers, that is disclosable pecuniary interest and private interest. Anyone anything to declare? You just put your hand up. I've got John Cotty's hand up. John?
Okay, I'm sorry to come on at a late stage, but I am a trustee of Home Pierpont Leisure Trust, which I never thought about until about 2 minutes ago. So obviously with the update on the contracts, I need to declare an interest, I believe, on that item that's coming up later on.
You are there as a member of the County Council, aren't you, in your capacity as County Council?
Yes.
Do you all accept that as a proper declaration of interest? Thank you very much. That's accepted, John. There's no reason that I see why you can't speak on that, since you are the County Council's representative on that.
That's right.
Yeah. And of course, it's not a remunerated position either. It's one that you do as part of your job. Thank you.
Okay.
So item 4 then is the COVID-19 update. I'm going to introduce this item. The report brings up to date the Policy Committee on the County Council's continued response to COVID-19 emergency. It provides up-to-date information on the public health situation, the public health role in local outbreak control. It also includes an update on the 5 programmes established to manage the response to the crisis. And the 5 programmes are support for vulnerable adults, support for vulnerable children and families, including schools, community support and resilience, and support for business and the local economy and corporate resilience. Information is included on the recovery structures that are developing, including the Council's internal corporate recovery and transformation group. We have set up a new committee for that. The Council's financial resilience group, statements on the current status of the Council's services that have faced disruption, and developments with partners in the local resilience forum. The response and recovery efforts continue to need to comply with emerging government guidance, and this of course is a moving feast, and the welfare service users, residents and staff remain central to decision making. Whenever possible, the Council is identifying opportunities to retain and develop the innovations that have been successful during the COVID-19 emergency to move the Council forward. We have been able to do things successfully, in my view, by changing our practices very quickly. The report reflects positively on the Council's continuing focus on protecting the most vulnerable, and also its plans for the recovery that addresses the broad impacts of the wide emergency corporately and with partners county-wide. And I propose that we accept this report. Do I have a seconder, please?
I second that report.
Thank you. Got your hand up. Yes, thank you very much. Right. Any speakers, please? Can I say yes? First of all, Councillor Rhodes, would you like to speak? Alan?
Yes, thank you very much, Kay. It's a good report, and as ever, I think we should recognise the work of our staff and those of our partners, particularly on the front line. I think they've been a credit to the council and served our community exceptionally well. I've got a question or two. I think I might only have one now, but I want to ask on the paragraph 47, reopening the High Street Safely Fund. Not quite clear how these figures have been arrived at and what criteria is being used. It appears to me disproportionate. So, for example, Mansfield, our biggest town, receives considerably less than Newark and Sherwood or Rushcliffe. That's no disrespect to Newark and Sherwood or Rushcliffe, by the way, but it doesn't, to the layperson, which is what I am, it doesn't seem to stack up. I wonder if we can have an explanation from that. Otherwise, Chair, I think Anthony, in our briefing yesterday, answered the other issues. I was going to raise the issue of school meals vouchers over the summer holidays, and I'm very pleased that Marcus Rashford shamed the government into doing the decent thing yesterday on that. So that's extremely pleasing. But I would like some clarification, if possible, on the reopening High Street Safety Fund, please.
Yeah. Who can answer this question? Is the Treasurer there, please, Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Unfortunately, there's no detail that backs or supports how those numbers are calculated, Alan.
Was this directly passported to the district councils from government?
It was, yeah, straightforward. You couldn't work out how that was calculated either. So
can I assume that they put these bids in themselves and these bids were approved by government?
No, it was an allocation, Leader. So there was, again, like I said, there's very little detail behind how they were calculated. I can write, if you like, Councillor Rhodes, to them to see if I can find out what the basis of the allocation was.
I'd appreciate that, Nigel, through you, Kay. I'd appreciate that, because clearly, you know, they're large sums of money, and I think it would be quite reasonable for any member of the public, having seen these figures, to query how that's been arrived at. So, if it were possible to get that information from government, from the Treasury, Nigel, that'd be very much appreciated.
Thank you, Nigel. Right, I've got Kate next, and then John Cotty. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. As Alan said, I mean, it's a good report, and clearly we need to recognise the work that's been done, and I know how hard officers and staff have been working, so just thank you to them. Just a couple of things just to raise. Under the Vulnerable Children, Young People and Families section, I'm talking here now about paragraphs 19 to 20. It says that there's no significant workforce absence challenges impacting on the service's ability to safeguard children. Next paragraph, it talks about fewer professionals having face-to-face contact with children, which means that the inquiries to the multi-agency safeguarding hub are actually reduced. And I just wonder there if that is actually what is actually being said there. If reading between the lines is, it's fine now, but it may not be in the future. And I just wonder what is actually going to be in place to make sure that when all this ends, if it does at some stage, or even if it's in stages, that there is the people, the resilience, the resources in place to help children. Because I know we've talked about hidden harm, haven't we? Because presumably there's kind of things going on now in households that we may not become aware of until lockdown ends. So that's one thing. The other thing I was just going to say was around paragraph 52 and the new economy cell. And I've not got a problem with that. And I know Nicola McCoy-Brown is an excellent officer. I'm not criticising her. But it just seems to me there's a proliferation of committees, cells, committees even, because we've got a new one, haven't we now? And I'm a little bit concerned if this continues too much, we're going to lose focus. We're not going to be able to monitor and evaluate what's going on, and we're not going to be able to properly assess in a strategic way what the impact has been. That's me done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back to that, Kate, because of course that's why we set a committee up, in order to bring all these things together. Next speaker I've got is John Cotty.
Thank you, Kate. Just part of an answer for Councillor Rhodes on the reopening of the High Streets funds. I know that Gary Wood was involved in this with town centre managers, and the districts themselves put forward what they were doing. I'm the same as our 151 officer. I'm not sure how it was divvied up, but I know Gary Wood's been involved in that. So it might be if we contact Gary, he'll be able to give us more information on it. While I'm using the opportunity to speak, I just wanted to say that the report on page 24, 25 and 26 on the reopening of our services, there's detail there for all members to see. There's a lot of work from our officers gone into this. It was easy enough to close things, and that was difficult enough, but reopening has been a real challenge for our staff, and I want to thank them publicly for everything that they've done and the hours they've put in. I know what work's been done, Kay. So we've got our libraries coming up soon next month, hopefully when we can reopen them. We have been planning for about 4 weeks on that, and hopefully that will be a success when government allow us to do it. But I just wanted to highlight the work our staff had done. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yes. Now, Muriel, I've got you're next.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I agree with you that particularly as a starter report, this is a very positive commendation of what how staff have responded to the crisis, particularly in my role, in particular the leadership in adult social care and in public health has been outstanding. I think in going forward, we perhaps do need to dig a bit more into what were the challenges and what are the continuing challenges, so that we understand what they're having to deal with. And I think there has been, as we've seen in the press, quite a dissonance between sometimes what's been said nationally and what local staff have had to deal with. So I think it would be good if future reports dug a bit more into particular aspects. Just 2 or 3 examples. In the policy implications paragraph, it does talk about how the report has met the public sector equality duty. There has been an initial report, hasn't there, from the government about the impact of COVID on disadvantaged groups, particularly on the BME communities. They've been weak on publicising the recommendations, but I think locally we need to be looking at what those recommendations are that we can put into place locally, because across the parties we are committed, aren't we, to tackling the health inequalities, particularly across the county. So I think we need some more detail of that in future reports. The other concrete example, I suppose, is the availability and quality of testing. Obviously, it has been shocking initially. Things are improving, but I see in the local communication, the most recent communication from adult social care is that a batch of testing material has come that's not fit for purpose, because the equipment with each element of it was too brittle and would have broken when it was being used. And I think it's issues like that that have really stressed both our officers and home care managers. You know, will the equipment come? Will it be of a good standard? And I just, it would be good if we could explore more if we could be resourced to manage this more locally, so that we're not given testing centres by the central government, but can decide for ourselves where best to have those centres. Just a third point is about the the partnership between health and social care. I think folk have worked very hard at this during the COVID crisis, but it has been tested very substantially by the ruling by the government that NHS had to empty thousands of hospital beds at speed into residential homes, many of whom weren't tested at all. Fortunately, I think the good relationships here in the county have moved beyond that, but it has been extremely difficult. And I think in moving forward, I think perhaps we need to learn from those challenges and support NHS and ourselves in finding really high quality way forward in hospital discharges. I mean, nationally, we have a very good reputation as an authority for dealing with hospital discharges, but I think we need to make sure that it is continuing to be safe in the future. Just a final point, in terms of the second recommendation, it seems to me there's so much, certainly from an adult social care point of view, that we need to review and work on to improve things in the future, that I'm concerned about it going to another committee rather than reports coming to policy, which is our senior and overarching committee, so that we avoid repetition, but that we do look at issues thoroughly, both in adult social care and policy. Thank you.
Yeah, on the latter point, of course, the COVID-19 Resilience Recovery Committee was actually set up by policy to report to policy, but for all it's a public committee, so anyone may come along and attend and listen. If you're a councillor, you can certainly sit, well, when we get back to normal again, sit with the committee members. It will be a very in-depth committee looking at a lot of things. I think it will meet very frequently, actually, because there's such a lot to cover here. And I think it's very important now we try and get all of this, all the strands pulled together, our learning curve, what we did, how well we did it, could we have done it better? All of that needs to be examined in great detail. And I think this is a committee which will need to have a lot of input, but I'm very keen. It's a public committee, so the public can hear the debate, as it isn't a subcommittee in some way which if you like, is a lesser committee. So I think it's one of the most important things we should be doing, because none of us were prepared for this mural. I look back and you think in February, did anyone foresee a summer quite like this? And the answer is no. So now this is the opportunity to take the learning curves in, see what we've done in the past, see how we can do it better. And the point you make about quality assurance, I think, is very well made. I think quality assurance when you're receiving anything is important. So that the committee will be able to look at all into that. And I hope from time to time you'll be able to attend, or perhaps you'll be put on there by one of your members. That's up to your group, of course. Right, I now have then David Martin, and then I've got John Peck. So David, please. David Martin. You're muted, David. Can you unmute yourself? No, you're still muted. You need to click your button on it. David, we still can't hear you. I'm going to come back to you. You won't miss your chance. I'll come back to you, though. And we'll go to John Peck now. John, floor's yours. Or the air's yours, should I say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, on a parochial matter, because it was mentioned earlier on and it's referred to in the report about the making measures on our high streets to enable businesses to open up safely and so on. I don't know whether this is the experience of other county councillors, but I wasn't invited to the meeting on the high street where officers from the district council and the Highways Department made some decisions about our high street in Edminstowe, taking out parking spaces and things like that. I think it's unfortunate if county councillors haven't been invited to meetings such as that, because I think we can give local input. And I was only consulted, is the word. I was told a week after the meeting on the high street had been taken. I was rung up and told what measures had been taken, which isn't really my idea of a consultation. So I do think that county councillors should be involved in any of these decisions that are made. Moving further on to the report, paragraph 17 states that it's unlikely that all of Nottinghamshire schools will be able to accommodate all the target year groups within the government's anticipated timelines, and indeed that hasn't been happening at all, as we know, and the government really bungled the return to schools, which is extremely unfortunate. I think if they'd listened more closely to head teachers and the professionals in schools and understood some of the difficulties that have been causing head teachers to lose sleep, trying to make their schools safe for children to come back, they might have not made the mistakes that they did. And I'm not even certain that schools will, as the report says, be able to meet the government's timetable even by September. So we'll have to watch this very closely. In no way is that a criticism of our officers at this county council, who I think have been working and over and beyond to keep in contact with schools and support schools throughout all of this crisis. And I think they've performed admirably, as indeed have our schools, our head teachers and their staffs throughout all of this crisis. But I think that has the return to schools has been handled very badly. But I know that we all want we all want children to be back in schools as soon as possible, but safely. I also know that we're all very concerned about the possible widening of the gap between the perhaps more the haves and the have-nots, if I can use that term. Certainly, our most vulnerable children are in danger of suffering educationally, and we don't want that to happen. I know there's also going to be an issue about school transport, as more children do get back into school, school transport is going to be a real headache, I think. I know I was talking to Gary Wood about that, and he was outlining to me some of the issues that are really facing the department with regard to ensuring the safety of students on school transport. And I think that's going to be something we're going to have to watch very closely. The last point I wanted to make is that I think the report is a very full report. I think it gives us lots of information about the excellent work this local authority has been doing through all of the departments and through all of this crisis. And I think it's keeping us very well informed, and I think it's a credit to this local authority and the officers. What is unsaid in the report, and I wouldn't have expected it to be in there at all, of course, but I've referred to one instance of the government bungling this response to the crisis, but I think that's been true throughout. And if there's been anything that's been world-beating about this government's response, it's been that we're probably amongst the 2 or 3 worst countries in the world in handling this. And unfortunately, coming back to this report, the knock-on effect of that is that in Nottinghamshire, just as in all over the country, decisions that have been made, wrong decisions, bad decisions, hurried decisions, U-turns, mean that this local authority and the residents are going to suffer for this, are suffering for this for years to come. And this county council is going to be in a very difficult position over the coming years, both financially and in dealing with the economic hit that this local authority and Nottinghamshire is going to take over the years. High unemployment, a real hit to the local economy, and we're going to be discussing this, I think, as a policy committee for years to come.
Thank you, John. It would be nice, of course, if the children could go back to school, wouldn't it? So their parents could go back to work. That would be really helpful. Yeah, I'm going to move on now. I've got David, back on. David, are you back there now?
I am, Chair, yes.
Right, David, I've got your name next then.
Right, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to policy. Yeah, I am struggling a little bit, although I welcome the paper. I think it's very comprehensive, the COVID-19 paper. I was a bit shocked to see so much about COVID on the policy committee this morning, because I thought that's why we'd set up separate committee for that. So can you, one of my questions is, Councillor Cooks, can you tell me when the first meeting of that committee will be? Moving on to paragraph 30, the Nottinghamshire Community Fund. Obviously, this fund was £1 million, and we've only paid out about 452,000 to community groups so far. Bearing in mind that the COVID situation is going on longer, and some of the organisations seem to have been disproportionately given the funding, and I think some of this funding was made by politicians, which it smacks of.
Let me just 1 moment. Let me put you straight in that. Yeah. This was a fund which people could bid into and be responded to. Yeah. Now, necessarily there were guidelines set down. Yeah. And those guidelines were to help the situation, not as some applicants have been, is simply to buy themselves things like laptops and telephones unless they could demonstrate that they were for this fund. Yeah. And I know it's been brought up in the past that Selston only got £300. Selston only bid for £300, got 100% of what they asked for.
Yeah, well, some of these groups are still continuing that work and still continuing to provide that service without the support of the county council. So will the leader consider reopening that fund to
the fund is not closed.
Right, so the people who've applied already, could they apply for further funding because it's going on longer?
Provided they fit the criteria. This isn't some way to try and dish out public money unless it's to fit the criteria, because of course it is public money we're spending, it's not ours. and therefore we do have a duty of care whenever we spend public money to spend it wisely on behalf of the public to fit the criteria. If it doesn't fit the criteria, they won't get the funding. If it does, there's a very good chance if it meets the criteria. Because it's been very evenly conducted. I was aware at the beginning when we set this fund up, we would be criticised for being unfair to some groups, and we have been scrupulously fair, and we've kept a running total for which areas have had what, and we've been pretty well even-handed across the county. But it is a fund for people to bid into.
Yes, but bearing in mind the COVID crisis has gone on longer than everybody originally anticipated, my question is, will those people that applied in the first instance be able to apply to that fund for further funding because it's going on longer?
For clarity's sake, the fund is still open. People can still bid into it, provided they meet the criteria and demonstrate that the public money is required to do the things we said it set out to do, which is make sure people had sufficient food, the medicines were delivered, that there was care where it was required, where people would have someone perhaps befriending to talk to. A lot of this has been passported through the CVSs across the county because they have just that criteria, but the fund is still open, but it has to meet the criteria.
Yeah, I think my only other comments are to the paper are that it clearly shows that the strategic partnerships are working very well, and the districts and boroughs have helped to deploy the business grant funding and the food parcels in a very, very good manner, and they've all worked very well, and I'm really proud of the employees at the districts and boroughs and at the county for the manner in which they continue the business. That's really all I've got to say.
Thank you, David. Right, I now have Richard Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was also going to pick up on the community fund. I mean, one of the words of the year, as well as pandemic and crisis and all the rest of it, is unprecedented, and everyone seems to be saying it. And the whole world, the whole country and the council is in an unprecedented position. The situation will no doubt continue to be so. But I have to say that the community fund is something that we really should be proud of as an authority. The officers and the team, the communities team in particular, who set this up with no notice. I mean, as you said a few moments ago, none of us knew that we would be in a situation like this 2 or 3 months ago. And for an authority the size of Nottinghamshire County Council to be able to show its flexibility and ability to respond to what is a crisis to the benefit of its residents wherever they live, whichever district or borough they live in, is to be commended. In my particular part of Nottinghamshire, the local CVS was a beneficiary of a grant, and their work is still going on, carrying the work out of pharmacy trips, shopping trips, support, and all the rest of it. And to pick up on Councillor Martin's a little dig, I suspect he was having there, though I don't know what he was trying to imply when he referred to politicians getting involved with grants, but I mean, probably like most other colleagues on this committee and throughout the council, as a local member, I was engaging with the likes of my local voluntary service and local community groups and simply told them, you need to check this grant out. It could be very helpful. And it's entirely up to the groups and the individuals whether they put a bid in, and that the applications are looked at very carefully, not by me or not by the politician, but by the officers in that department. So and as the leader has just said, the funding is still there. It's not all been spent yet, but I'm very pleased to see that there are safeguards in there to prevent not necessarily mischievous type claims that you might worry about in this sort of situation, but claims that really aren't suitable for this fund. But you never know, there may be support elsewhere, either within this council or indeed other authorities as well. So very grateful this community fund is in place, but crucially, so are the residents who are benefiting from it. Finally, on a slightly lighter note, picking up on the point about schools going back, of course we all want schools to be back. Next door behind me through my window here is the Cockgrave Church of England Primary School, and you may be able to hear children playing in the playground as we speak. And of course, it's been like that since the start of this crisis, because the school, as with all the other schools, had been open all the time for children of the critical workers. And again, mention and thanks must be given to everyone, staff involved in that as well. But we really are in unprecedented times, as everyone says, and everyone is, I'm sure, doing the best they can.
Thank you, Richard. I've now got Bruce Lawton. Bruce.
Yes, thank you very much, Kay. I must admit, I do find it a bit disappointing that the opposition are trying to use every opportunity to have a swipe at government. I mean, government have had a difficult job. They have made mistakes. You know, I can see Pecky smiling. But, you know, the only person, John, that doesn't make mistakes is the person that sits on his arse and does nothing. Sorry. Sorry. Anyway, I'd just like to make the point. I mean, I think Boris has done a good job, actually, and I think it's time for you to change the record, really. David, I've got to put the record straight on your comment, really. Kay actually made a plea to you lot. She recognised that Mansfield and Ashfield were underfunded as far as the community support hub was concerned, and actually made contact with you and said, can you please get in touch with your organisations and get them to put the bids in, which most other councillors, I might add, had already done. I mean, you do have a past history of doing this. What you do is you don't apply, and then you don't get the funding, and then you bellyache about it. You know, you should grandstand over that particular issue. I mean, you've only just got to use John Cotty's highways fund and the highways priorities. You know, you just don't put the bids in, and so you don't get the money, and then you shout about it. Well, my suggestion to it is actually you engage with your communities and actually start to put these bids in, and then you might find that the money follows directly after that. My real reason for speaking was on the community support hub and the funding that has come through that. I mean, I must admit, it was quick. It was easy for the organisations to access funds, and the money was transported over extremely quickly. A number of my communities, I rang around all my parishes, I've got 18 of them, and said, get your bids in if you need some funding. And a number of them put bids in, and a number of them were successful, and rang me up and emailed me congratulating the county council on its ability to be able to react quickly to this particular situation. So my thanks to UK and also to the team for putting that fund in place. It has had a significant impact, particularly on communities like Norrell, Sutton-on-Trent, who've been able to access. They even opened up an account with the local co-op to supply food to my vulnerable residents in Sutton-on-Trent. So it really is a thank you.
Thank you very much. David, you've spoken well, so we don't take second speakers on committees. Just for information, Ashfield's had 58,000, Bassett Lords had 70,000, nearly 71. Broxto's had 58,000, Gedling's had 46,000, Mansfield's had 53, Newark and Sherwood 92, Rushcliffe 71, and the county-wide we have 110,000 has gone out, so altogether £451,740 has been spent. So that's the fund. David, I don't come back to second choice if there's only one speak. Sorry, you've had your turn. I'm now going to move on. No, I'm sorry. You've had your turn to speak. There was no point of order. You've had your turn. I'm not coming back for a second chance. And I'm now going to move on. I'm now going to move on. I'm now going to move on.
With every single group.
I am now going to move on. I would ask you to respect the chair in this. Everyone else so far has managed to manage the situation. We're all working from home. I know how difficult it can be, but I'm now going to move on. I have other speakers who wish to speak, and I have Tony Harper.
I'm being berated incorrectly, Kath.
Thank you, Leader. On a similar subject, I'd like to thank the Council for accepting my proposal at the March policy meeting to allow urgent CDF funding to be made available, which would include running costs to fund hard-working community initiatives. I've currently funded Eastwood Food Bank, Eastwood Volunteer Bureau, Eastwood Memory Cafe, Eastwood Age Concern and Eastwood People's Initiative. And a big thank you from the residents of Eastwood, because it has made a big difference. So thank you to the council for allowing us to do that.
Thank you very much. And of course, that fund is at any member's disposal, are £5,000 a year for local groups. I now have others. Do I have any other speakers? I've got 2 more waiting. Can you put your hands up so I can get them in a running order? Right, I've got Richard Jackson, Chris Barnfather, and then Philip Owen. So Richard Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Really just to draw members' attention to pages 20 and 21 of the report, where obviously looks at the financial implications. And obviously this is a human tragedy, but there's a financial element to it. So it's just to really assure members, colleagues, that we've worked hard to understand the financial implications right across the council. You can see from the table on page 13 that excluding possible council tax income reductions, so the possibility of people not paying council tax basically, and business rates through the year, we're currently looking at around £48 million as a cost to the authority. You'll also see within the report we've had 2 tranches of funding which total just under £37 million from government, and so we are lobbying, officers are lobbying, and the CCN is lobbying government to ensure that we fill that gap, and that the unforeseen costs of all this don't fall on the local council taxpayer. We are probably overdue a 3rd tranche of funding now from central government, and we are expecting that imminently. There's a delta return, so we have to return to government monthly our estimates of the costs to the authority of the COVID crisis. That's due on Thursday, and I would hope that that will be digested by government and that we'll see some further announcements on funding coming along fairly shortly afterwards. It appears that some of this is going to be long-term additional cost to council, because I'm not sure quite what normal is going to look like in the future. I think it was Councillor Peck who mentioned homeschool transport. That's going to look different, and it's going to look more expensive to us as well in the future. So all of these things will need to be paid for. We have shared this information with opposition groups throughout the last 2 or 3 months, because we're conscious, obviously, we haven't been able yet to hold a finance committee meeting, although we will be holding one before the summer recess, and there'll be more opportunity to go into these costs in detail. All of the costs which have arisen through departments have been challenged by finance officers, and so we are confident that the costs are the real costs, although the longer this goes on, then the more we're going to be adding to these costs. We'll continue to keep colleagues updated on that.
Thank you very much. I now have Chris Barnfather.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I had to do a double take actually, because I was watching this screen and I thought I'd turned into Sky News by mistake, because I've got Councillor Peck there, who I love listening to because he is such an articulate speaker. But it was a little bit like listening to Adam Bolton, Beth Rigby or Kay Burley delivering the news, full of gloom, doom and despondency. I think you need to swap channels, John, in relation to where you take your news. Handled badly.
Father, it's good to know he has a second career ahead of him, isn't it?
Absolutely. And next May, of course, it may be
2,000 people have died, Chris. I don't think it's happy days, do you?
It may be needed next May, Leader. You're absolutely right, a second career. But in terms of handled badly, I think that a lot of people think that this government have handled this exceptionally well. Not badly, not third worst in the world, I think we were quoted as being. And in relation to losing sleep, head teachers losing sleep. Well, I think a lot of head teachers are losing sleep simply because of the way they have been threatened, cajoled and bullied by certain members of trade unions. The reality of it is that where schools are operated and maintained by academy trusts, of course, the responsibility lies with the trustees, of which I'm a trustee of an academy trust. None of our head teachers have lost sleep over this. They actually have recognised they've been supported by their trust. The difficulty, of course, is where individual head teachers or chairs of governors have to accept that responsibility because they're not protected by a trust. And the threats that they've had of legal action being taken against them personally, quite simply, has been unacceptable. If I can just quote a school in Worksop, in fact, the 2 schools in Worksop, the 2 secondaries, the outward schools there, all their year 10 pupils are back this week. Well, all the year 10 pupils that choose to attend back this week. They have been planning for this for a long time. They've been desperate to get their children back into the school, and they've done an excellent job of doing that. And indeed, they've split all their year 10s into groups of 8 to 10 pupils. And over the course of the week, every one of those pupils who wishes to attend will be in school this week and will be receiving some form of education. And that is surely what we should be pushing for across the board. Just in relation to the report, obviously it's Derek Higton's name appended to the bottom of it. I think it's an excellent detailed report. Derek, if you're the author, if you're not, then I'd ask you to pass on my compliments to whoever is the author. This is a strategic overview report. It's an excellent detailed report. Then, of course, you'll go down into the individual issues around whether it's adult social care and health, children and young persons, and you'll deal with that individually at those committees. We're a policy committee. This is for strategic purposes, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And now I've got Philip Earn. Philip.
Yes, thank you, Leader. If I can give updates and deal with some of the points that have been raised. First of all, going back to what Councillor Fowle said under the vulnerable children and young peoples and families section, you'll see at paragraph 21 and 22 there is a proposal to ask for disapplication of certain regulations. Just one, in fact, we are looking to be disapplied from, and that proposal was approved unanimously at the Children and Young People's Committee on the 15th of June. The one that we're seeking disapplication from is to deal with the possible need for extra foster carers in an emergency situation. Understandably, normally the procedures would be quite long, and it's only if you've got close family, that you would be able to take in a child fairly quickly. What we're hoping to do is, if the need arises, and I emphasise if the need arises, we're hoping to use county council employees who are known to us to act as foster carers in the event that we need to do so. And I think that is very sensible forward planning. And I hope Councillor Peck doesn't regard that as being bungled. I'm sure he doesn't, because he voted for it on Monday. Councillor Fowle mentioned paragraphs 19 and 20. It is true that referrals to the MASH have reduced. I think it's getting on towards 50%. I haven't got those figures those up-to-date figures in front of me this morning, but that was the case a while ago. That's not quite as serious as it might sound, because a fair number of referrals to the MASH, when they are investigated, are found to require no further action. So there will be, or there would have been, a fair number of those in the mix. But where it talks about fewer professionals having face-to-face contact with children, there it would be referring to schools. Clearly, those professionals who may be alert to issues that would needed to be referred in are not getting that face-to-face contact. And so we may well expect that when we move further out of the lockdown process and more children are getting back to school, that we will see an increase in the number of referrals. But in anticipation of that, I would refer Councillor Fowle to the report that went to Children's Committee on Monday, where we have increased the number of advanced practitioners, social worker posts. These are the experts that we've got in the front line that we are seeking to retain working on the front line, who are able to support not only their own caseload, but also to support the less experienced, younger members of the social care staff. And we are on a face-to-face or phone contact weekly with those that we know that need that. I accept there are some that we do not know. In addition to those advanced practitioner roles that we approved, we are keeping the agency staff that we have on the books in anticipation of an increase in numbers, so that we are preparing for that eventuality. So I think members can be reassured that we are doing everything that we can to deal with the difficult situation that we find ourselves in. This will come at a cost, and I'm sure Councillor Jackson is already aware of that, but I think that cost is well met. I need also, I think, to bring you up to date with the school situation as well. As of yesterday, and this is a global figure, as of yesterday, there were just under 15,000 Nottinghamshire children in school. It's 14,992. 80% of the estate, the school estate, was being used. The reason why not all of them would be being used is that some schools are still operating as a hub, but I'm sure that will vary. I don't have detailed breakdown for that global figure, but as of last Thursday, that was before the new the new unlocking for year 10 and year 12. We had 11,323 children attending schools in Nottinghamshire. 5,278 were from the new targeted year groups. That was reception year 1 and year 6. 5,035 were of key workers, and that really is a significant figure. That has allowed key workers to get into the front line and deal with this dreadful disease. And I've no doubt those key workers have been greatly thankful for schools taking in the children, so it's one less thing to worry about. And 1,010 were vulnerable children. Now, I was disappointed, Leader, that Councillor Peck decided to throw politics into this. I know Councillor Peck, and indeed many of the opposition, are blessed with a wonderful talent, which is called hindsight. And of course, there will be lessons to be learned from the whole of this. But if I can just say how Nottinghamshire tried to prepare for what were, I think, aspirational ambitions of the Secretary of State to get as many children back into school as he possibly could. And I'm sure he makes no apology for that, and we make no apology for that. Officers of this department, worked tirelessly with head teachers, because my philosophy was that we work with head teachers. They are the ones on the ground that know their schools, know what has to be done, and are in a position to reassure pupils and parents and staff. And that was working extremely well. Detailed risk assessments were worked out and produced by head teachers, were gone over with staff in the department. People were, head teachers were put in touch with health and safety experts so that their risk assessments could be evaluated and validated. And we were all, head teachers were all set to go when on the Friday before they were due to start, the expansion was due to take place, teacher unions started to threaten head teachers with reporting them to the health and safety executive. It's no good shaking your head, Councillor Rhodes. That is exactly what happened. Can
we move on now? Because
they wrote to head teachers threatening to report them, and that threw a spanner in the works and put us back and reduced the number of children going back into school. But planning is going on, and we are seeking to get as many children back into school, and I'm sure we will achieve that with the full cooperation of head teachers and the teaching staff, to whom I give thanks. Thank you, Leader, for that.
Thank you very much. I now have Mike Pringle. Mike.
Thank you, Leader. Firstly, thanks to Councillor Jackson for highlighting the fact that there's continued lobbying for further financial support during this time, because I think we all recognise that financially that's going to be key to how we move on and how quickly we respond to this. And again, I think we're all, every single one of us, is aware that we all want our children back at school, but it has to be done in a safe manner. And I can assure Councillor Owen that the schools in and around me have not been threatened by any union whatsoever. Some clarity on the schools that have been affected, I would like to know. Being a unionist myself, I would gladly challenge those unions. And also, you know, we're blusterers. This is a serious situation. We can't get away from that. But to think that the loss of 42,000 lives is not a government disaster, I find bewildering. One life would have been too many. 42,000 is a disaster. So thanks for letting me rant. The report, I find a solid report for an initial report. There is changes that we need to make, and I think people have highlighted that. But I think we can move on and be more detailed in that. So thank you, Leader.
Mike, you never rant. That was a very measured speech. Thank you very much indeed. I now have Samantha Deakin. Samantha?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it took me a minute to get my fingers to work.
Right.
I wanted to put on record my thanks for the Community Support Hub. I've rang through quite a few of my vulnerable residents who have found themselves with family quite a long way away, who have been very, very isolated during this. And, you know, I've done shopping where I can and all the rest of it. But actually ringing through to the Community Hub, they acted very quickly, very well. It was really, really good service for the residents that I needed it to be for. That was really, really good. I'm really, really pleased. So thank you very much for that. And I know I'm one of the quieter members. I don't always speak. I don't always, and I don't rant like some of you. I don't. But I do take a little bit of offence, Bruce, when you say that I don't know my community, so I don't stand up for my communities and I'm not engaging with them, because I do. Just because I'm a little bit quieter here doesn't mean that I don't know what's going on in my communities and that I'm directing them in the right places for funds, because I do, and I work very hard to do that. But as a whole, the report's very, very good, and I'm pleased that the support hub was there and it helped when I needed it to. So thank you.
Thank you, Samantha, and I know you represent your community well. Right, Glyn Guilfoyle, please. Glyn.
Thank you, Chairman. My starting point is actually just to reiterate what our colleagues have been saying, is that we feel that Nottinghamshire County Council during this crisis has done an excellent job. Its staff and right across with our partners. But there are concerns about the way in which the government have dealt with some of the issues, issuing statements on, say, Thursday for implementation on the Monday, the following Monday, giving people little time to be able to deal with some of these situations. And I think the teachers' union in particular raised what I would say were legitimate concerns about some of the circumstances that their members could have been put into. Now, from my particular point of view, what I would say is locally, my local schools have been working very well. They have, and I think the tribute needs to be paid to them, that they've been kept open all through this crisis. They have never closed. They have had key workers in, children in, and they have tried their best to get as many children in this second phase of extension into school. And I think we should thank them for that. But there are still legitimate concerns all around from parents and from teaching staff about how we deal with this and how we expand it even further, which I think we all want to do. Just a particular point on Bruce. I mean, Bruce is supposed to be the chair of the governance board and about members' behaviour, yet here we are again. Is it Bruce using what I would call bad language in particular on something that's being televised for people? And I think someone should really have a little word with him about his particular behaviour. Just one issue in relation to the government. They do not seem to be listening until pressure is put upon them. And I think that is clearly stated out by the announcement for the extension of free school meals, where we saw that Daniel Rashford had come out with a particular issue that we all know about. You know, I can't understand in reality why, even without the COVID crisis, that in some cases we're not providing free school meals to children, vulnerable children, right through anyway. I think it ought to have been a national policy even during holiday periods, because, you know, just because children are not in school doesn't mean that they get a good meal at home. We know that. In fact, that's why a lot of it is provided anyway. So my view would be that it ought to be a national policy that we continue with that. But I think the government have got to listen, and they've got to pull the finger out, and they are particularly embarrassing. But all in all, what I will say, out of that embarrassment, the county council has done particularly well.
Thank you, Glyn. Bruce, I'm going to give you a chance to apologise publicly for using language which probably shouldn't be used on air and probably shouldn't be used at all. So now's your chance, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Leader. I apologise profusely. Samantha, I apologise to you. It was, and I know how you operate as a councillor, and it was not meant as a criticism of you as an individual. It was other members of your group. So I'm sorry that you felt like that. Okay.
Thank you, Bruce. Are you satisfied, Glyn? You're gone.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, and thank you, Bruce.
Would anybody else like to speak? Yeah. Right, I've got Reg now, who is who's seconded this and reserved the right to speak. So I'm going to bring you in, Reg.
Okay, thank you, Chairman or Leader. Strong debate on a very, very, very important subject. I think it was a lot of comments made there, and you know, the only thing I can really add to that now, because without going all over it again, is to say that in the recommendations, I think we've got to get this COVID-19 Resilience Recovery Renewal Committee up and running, and I think the sooner we do that, the better. And I would hope that we could actually get our first meeting from here, and I don't know what the officers think, but the first meeting from here somewhere early July, so that we can start this process of recovery, because recovery is what it's all about. We need the economy of Nottinghamshire up and running again and back, because we know the consequences of COVID will have some devastating effects on a lot of communities of the nature of it. But hopefully we can now get this committee working along with all the other things of county council to get ourselves back and up and running again. Hopefully COVID, if we behave ourselves and do what they tell us to do, we might see the end of it over the next 6 to 9 months. I wouldn't look for it any quicker than that. Okay, so with saying that, second the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we have had a very good debate, and can I thank all members that have contributed? I think it's just about everybody. There are certain issues which, of course, sometimes took right at the top of the agenda, like providing protective equipment. That was very difficult at one time. I understand we now have sufficient protective equipment to fulfil all of our needs. We have had a particular concern of vulnerable people because, of course, our day centres have been closed, but that doesn't mean to say the service to people has been closed. Sterling efforts have been made to make quite sure that people did have an opportunity, if they're required, for someone to go into their home and be of service to them in their home. I think vulnerable children and families is always something we all get very, very worried about. I personally think there's nothing worse for a child than be trapped into an unhappy home, not cared for, and perhaps with violent parents or parents who just don't take enough notice of their children. And so it's really important that that group of children have been looked after. I also think it's important that all children receive an education. And many have been in school, and I know, and I am so thankful to the schools that have kept themselves open, the way they have worked together in the hubs to provide education, coming together as schools to pool their resources, has worked extremely well. But I should like to think that all children are going to have a chance to go back to school again. The support hub was set up in record time, as we reported at the last committee. That support hub has been invaluable. Some members have mentioned it today. I was able to use that on various occasions for directing people there in my own division where they could get that sort of help. Sometimes it was just advice, sometimes it was passing on, sometimes it was somebody who's desperate for actually getting medicines or something, and we were able to put them in touch with people. So I think that has worked extremely well. And that what was a piece of work that was very, very swiftly executed because we had to. The community fund was set up in good faith. I'm sorry if it's been treated as differently. It was meant to be an extra fund where people who were volunteers, that's giving their time and probably their resources freely, could go somewhere to get some money to buy food or transport if they need that in the very rural areas or whatever it might be. It wasn't meant to be a sort of slush fund anywhere, and it has been properly administered, and you've heard the figures today, and it is still open for anyone who's listening, but it will not be open if it's misused. It must be used for the reason it was set up, because we are guardians of the public purse. I must say that again. We are guardians of the public purse, and therefore it's up to every one of us to make quite sure money that's paid into the county council is spelt wisely on behalf of the people who pay it in, and that's all of us. The local enterprise partners have played their part, and so have all the other people we have been working with. The Growth Hub has been very well run by the county council. I think the county council stepped up to the plate in the very early days and did this extremely well. Reopening of the High Streets Fund. I wasn't invited either, John, to a meeting of this. Therefore, my intelligence wasn't required either. So I do think county councils should have been involved in this. And district councils complain bitterly we don't always work with them. It is a two-way street, isn't it? Discretionary business grants for COVID-19. The grant application process has been published on the County Council's website for anyone that wishes to go there. Workforce have worked extremely well, and I do have to congratulate all of them because everyone's had to work extremely quickly. But I would like to say thank you to the senior officers and directors of departments who've had to pull things together, again working from home largely, and it sometimes has been quite difficult, but nevertheless it's worked very well. And I've detected this morning from all of you on the screen in this meeting from Policy Committee how very much you'd like to convey to officers the way this council has worked, the way it's brought forward its best endeavours to work together. And I think that, thank you for that. I'm sure all members can agree with that as well. So there's the Local Resilience Forum, of course, was part of the first hub that was set up, and that's under the police, the Chief Constable. That draws together all of the people in those services, probation service, for example, where it might be. All those services are brought together, but the majority of work is being carried out by the County Council, because we are probably the only ones with all of the resources there. So that's a quick canter through this report. And can I remind members what we're voting on? The members consider whether they require any further actions in relation to the issues contained in the report, and that members agree that further reports will go to the proposed COVID-19 Resilience and Recovery and Renewal Committee. And the reason for that is so we can have a detailed discussion. We've had a long discussion today, but policy probably isn't the right committee to go into great detail. And I should not like to think we were going to leave any stone unturned. So that committee will meet hopefully at the beginning of July. We shall have a scoping meeting towards the end of this week or beginning of next week. And July, I'm hoping we're all going to be able to get there. And I'm looking forward to your nominations from other groups to this committee. It is going to look, as I say, in detail, and as often as we need to look at these things in order to carry the council forwards. So with those recommendations, can I now move the report? We're now going to say, sort of counterintuitively, is anyone against it?
And colleagues, just for your information, I can see every member on my screen. So if you want to vote against and can indicate, then I can see you. And at the moment, I can't see anyone indicating against.
Any abstentions? Then the report's carried unanimously. And thank you for the debate this morning. I think it's been a very good debate. I'm now going to move on to item 5 on the agenda. This is the COVID-19 Cultural Service contract variations. And I'm going to ask my colleague John Cotty to propose this as it lies within his committee. John.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval for time-limited contractual variations with country partners to mitigate the financial impact of the COVID-19 crisis. The leisure sector has been hit quite hard, by the crisis, and the council's two commercial country park partners, Parkwood Leisure, who manage Rufford, and Home Pierpont Leisure Trust, who manage Home Pierpont Country Park, have both made requests for financial support due to the loss of revenue caused by the crackdown. This report proposes implementing time-limited contract variations with both partners in accordance with national guidance on providing relief to contractors during the COVID-19 crisis, to give them financial resilience and protect jobs for Nottinghamshire's residents, and ultimately ensure these two much-loved country park sites can still be enjoyed by the public of the county as the world returns to a state of normality. The recommendations are on page 34, and number 1 is that the policy, principles and parameters for establishing contract variations with our country park partners, Parkwood Leisure and Home Pierpont Leisure Trust, including open book accounting procedures, are agreed for the reasons set out in the report. The Service Director for Place and Communities be authorised to finalise terms within those parameters and to agree the completion of the necessary contract variations in consultation with the Group Manager for Legal Services and the Section 151 Officer. And the third recommendation is Finance and Major Contracts Management Committee monitors the situation and progress with recovery at the sites and receives a further report about the potential need for any extension of support before the end of September 2020. So I'd like to propose those recommendations, Leader. Thank you.
And I will second those and reserve the right to speak. Could I have the first speaker? I've got Glyn Guilfoyle's hand up. Alan, do you want to come in first? Because I did say
let Glyn go first.
Okay. Yeah, Glyn then, and then Alan.
Thank you, Leader. Leader, it goes without saying that obviously we would want to support keeping jobs and ensuring as much as possible that people's jobs, especially within Nottinghamshire, are kept secure and safe. And just going back to the other previous debate, you can talk about some of the things that the government have done, but on one thing you cannot take back the fact of the furloughing, and some of the things that have been put in for businesses have been significant and unique to what has been done in other countries. But my concern just on this at the moment is just trying to understand some of the financial issues around this. And I know there's a confidential report later on, but I think what I would want to understand is obviously this is a contract. This is about loss of profit, I would presume, and clearly most of the staff, I would presume, are furloughed, so there is no financial implication there. And the other bit is, what assistance are they getting relating to the discretionary business grants, etc., etc. And I know businesses can be complicated on the way that they're financed, but I really would want to understand that, because for the county council then to do this, there are many other companies that possibly in a similar manner, and I just think that we need to make sure that what we're doing is A, legitimate, and B, what other assistance are they getting, or can we help them to get other assistance directly from central government, as other businesses in the previous report state, lots of money has gone to them. So it's difficult for me to understand clearly why they need this much support if it's just about the profit issue.
Can I bring Derek Hitton here, Officer of the County Council, without mentioning any figures or numbers, Derek, because that is in the exempt part of the report. Could you just explain the reasoning behind this report today?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to pick up on your question, Councillor Guilfoyle, what the report makes mention of in a couple of places is the principle of open book accounting. And what that means is that we'll be able to work with both Parkwood Leisure and the Leisure Trust at Home Pierpont to ensure that the costs that they identify, which are additional costs as a result of the crisis of effectively keeping both Rufford and the National Water Sports Centre in operation, are legitimate. That means that what we'll be able to do is to guard against the possibility that profit is being made out of the additional funding. So the purpose is not to preserve the profits of partners, but to ensure that the costs that they cannot meet from other means, because of course with furloughed staff, government meets 80% rather than 100% of the cost. Both sites have significant staffing establishments, particularly the National Water Sports Centre, particularly in the summer because it's a seasonal, at least in part seasonal operation. So they've got significant costs that they can't meet through the various government funding streams. And what both partners are asking us to do is to support them to enable to keep the sites in operation over the coming months. What we're not doing is enabling them to continue to make the kind of margin that they would make under normal circumstances. This is absolutely about business and service continuation rather than supporting profitability.
And of course, both of those premises belong to the County Council. They're managed on our behalf. So we have an interest in making sure they're there for the future. Alan, I'll bring you in now, if that's all right.
Thanks, yes. I mean, Glyn covered most of the points that the Labour Group wanted to make. We'd had a discussion about this earlier. That's why I wanted him to go before me. But I'm not really persuaded about this. I mean, look, there are mechanisms introduced by government by which companies can seek assistance if they've got issues arising out of the COVID crisis. We as an organisation, a public sector organisation, are facing some crippling costs ourselves that the government, having promised to cover, have now backtracked on. And that is going to have an impact on, in many ways, both on the day-to-day services that we deliver and on our capital programme, our aspirations for the people of this county. I'm not quite sure, and I'm not convinced actually, that we should be about subsidising commercial organisations that have tendered for a contract, that have accepted the contract on those terms, and frankly, organisations like Serco should be big enough to wash their own faces. And so I fail to be convinced, and I'm grateful, incidentally. I have picked up Anthony's text. I nipped out earlier while I switched the camera off and speaker and nipped out and picked the phone up earlier. So I'm grateful, Derek, and Anthony for that information, but I'm still not persuaded that this is the correct use of public money. We're not being told that either of these businesses are going to turn their toes up at any time soon, and that's a good thing, obviously. But I'm really not convinced that we should be spending public money subsidising commercial organisations, and that's what we're being asked to do.
Can I just check with you, Derek, here? Do either of these companies receive funding in the normal sense annually from the County Council?
Thank you. So both of the contracts for Rufford and the National Water Sports Centre include an existing element of funding from the County Council, so an existing element of subsidy. I think, and both are mentioned in the report. I think in the case of the National Water Sports Centre, it's just under £120,000 a year, and it's just under £200,000 a year, I think, from memory, for Rufford Country Park. I think it's also worth stressing that the leisure sector more generally, including the providers that we're talking about this morning, both of them are facing, I think, what can best be described as an existential threat at the moment in terms of their core business operations. And I know that both organisations are in contact with many other local authorities because, of course, most of their business is rooted in local authority leisure contracts, in respect of having very similar conversations up and down the country with a number of local authorities that have similar arrangements for leisure centres, sports provision and so on. So what the County Council is proposing here isn't out of step with what's happening in other local authorities elsewhere in the country.
Thank you. And now I've got David Martin. David.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the support of both the Home Pierpont and Rutland Country Park. They are great assets and they are colossal organisations that need to be supported, because obviously social distancing has impacted on them greatly, and it would be a tragic loss for either of these two facilities to close, and for the posterity and health and well-being of the public at large. I think it's a great thing that we're doing, and finding another contractor to replace the existing contractors will be the more difficult end of the deal. So I'm fully in support of this motion.
Thank you. Right, I've got Kate Fole. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not persuaded either. I mean, just to give a kind of a parallel argument, I think, to this. I mean, I understand that the criteria for this, the rationale for this is that these companies are managing our assets. But I mean, we have, for example, 170 schools, I understand, still as part of our estate, still maintain schools, with a raft of small and medium-sized enterprises actually supplying goods and services to them. And it never seems to me to be a level playing field with the smaller business. Small business, SMEs are the actually lifeblood of our local economy. And here again, we seem to be giving a massive amount of money to Sercoach, to the big organisations, and giving them a leg up in a way that we're not for the SMEs. It just feels to me wrong.
Right, thank you. Chris Barnfather, I've got you down, Reg.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Leader. And again, I thank Derek. It seems to be the Derek Higton Appreciation Society for me this morning, but I thank Derek for the clarification that he's just offered. The contract, as I understand it from the papers, was when we originally set this, it was predicated on a balance between income and subsidy. The subsidy, irrespective, we would be paying. What we're actually being asked is to pay more than we would have normally expected to do, to balance out the fact that the unprecedented circumstances mean that there has been no income to offset those running costs. We went to these companies in the first place because they provided a good service, and for us to maintain, and I know it's a much used phrase, but two jewels in the crown of Nottinghamshire County Council's leisure offer. That leisure offer, the need for that is not gone away. If anything, it's increased massively during the recent pandemic and circumstances in which we now all find ourselves. The Rufford, I visit regularly. It's such a popular place for our residents across Nottinghamshire, and indeed our tourist offer from outside of Nottinghamshire. We cannot afford at this moment in time for it to be closed and not accessible to the public at a time when the public have a greater need of open green spaces, and indeed are exercising far more than traditionally. I think we're all exercising more simply because it's one of the few things that we can still do. So a greater need for places such as Home Pierpont and Rufford exists at this moment in time than any other. These are very unusual circumstances, and we have to be flexible enough to be able to roll with the blows that we are currently going. To me, it would be absolutely counterproductive to fail to support these trusts and companies at a time when we most need them, where potentially this facility would be closed to the public for a lengthy period of time while we looked at alternative providers. So at the end of the day, where the funding comes from this, one would hope that it will form part of our business case when we go back to central government for additional funding to the two tranches that we've already had, that we will it will be recognised that we will support its continued functionality, and it will form part of our bid. Irrespective of whether that funding is forthcoming from central government, I think we have a duty as the county council to continue to provide this facility, and this is the only feasible way forward.
Chair, on a point of clarification, I must pick up on this because two speakers have indicated now that the failure to support this could result in these facilities being closed. Nowhere in this report does it say that, and in fact, that's not the case. I think this is scaremongering, and it's actually unfair to suggest that by not supporting this, we would support these facilities to be closed. That isn't the case, and the two speakers that have just said so know that that's not the case.
Can I ask, please, for clarification? Derek, is there any clarification on that?
It's certainly the case that if the additional subsidies proposed weren't to be delivered to the providers, then that would cause us to, and I think the report mentions it in terms of other options considered, have to consider all of the choices that faced us, because I think that would make both contracts untenable from the provider's perspective, and the effective position then would be that the provisions would come back to the direct responsibility in terms of operation of the county council. That would then leave the county council to be able to determine the future operation and management arrangements for both sites. The officer view of that would be that in both cases the costs resulting from that, and it's alluded to in the report, would exceed those that are currently proposed in the report.
Yes, Home Pierpont's actually in my division, and I do recall in the past we subsidised it by over £1 million a year, in spite of trying to run it profitably ourselves. In that time, the company that's running it actually reduced that subsidy by, it was coming down almost to nil. So they have made an extremely good job at running it, better than the county council did. So if it comes back to the county council, you've heard the officer say it would probably, the cost would be far higher to us. So to say it would close, it would probably close initially. The country parks have been open and we haven't been getting any reward for the services there for a long time. Now the car parks are bringing money in, but it's going to be a very, very long climb back, because the whitewater rafting is not being opened at Home Pierpont. We've got the canoeing, but it's the clubs only. The gym's opening next month, but that again is only for members. So the income is very small compared with the enormous income we would have in the summer with the regattas, and of course all the on-site sales as well through the cafeteria and all the other things. So it's quite an expensive operation. So hope you accept that this is genuinely, if we don't spend this money, then this will become a cost on the council, and a far greater cost. Thank you. Right, I have Reg now, and then Mike Pringle. Reg.
Remembering to unmute, haven't I? We have to remember. Yeah, I've listened to the discussion. I think what Derek, the officer, just said. I mean, these were two establishments which were managed by the council. We found that we couldn't afford to manage them ourselves. We took them to outside sources and outsourced them because of the financial benefits of doing so, and the financial benefits to the public of doing so. And if we don't support them now, those financial benefits will go away, because during COVID, we know the loss of revenue. They have a massive loss of revenues, because that's how they fund themselves, through the revenues that they take for the services they offer. And those are not there because of COVID over the last 3 months. So we have to recognise that, whether we like it or not. And therefore, I see no way out of this. As a commercial organisation, if we don't help them to stay in business, they will fold, and therefore the costs will come back to the council in far excess of any costs that have been talked about in these papers. So therefore, we don't really have much of an option. The only option we have got is to make sure we go through a good scrutiny of the figures that they want to charge us for during this period, to ensure we get the best deal out of them and that they survive. So when we come out the other end, we have those benefits. And you're quite right, Kay. Home Pierpont was cost us £1.1 million in 2010. I think in 2019 it cost us less than £100,000 as the taxpayer goes. They made it pay. They made it work. They actually improved the situation well beyond anything we ever did as a council, because they're a commercial organisation. That's their expertise. We need to keep it on board. We need to keep it there, and we need to be prudent in how we do it. And so therefore we've got to support it.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers, please? Mike, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I thought I'd asked you to come speak.
Thank you, Chairman. There's no question that both of these areas are fantastic areas for Nottinghamshire. Every one of us visits at least one of these on a regular basis, and invariably when we do so, even though they have introduced car parking charges, the areas are completely full. So of prime importance to Nottinghamshire. However, I find the immediate hand hold out for public money during this time, when we already support them and have continued to support them over the years since they've taken it on. Quite shocking. I find the fact that members here are suggesting, without any proof at all, that if we don't support them, that they will close. Hopefully not, because government's telling us things are going to change reasonably quickly and that everybody will be visiting places really quickly. So hopefully that's wrong. But again, for the report to suggest that it will be employees that suffer, I find this a disgraceful gun to the head comment to make, to be quite honest. I shan't be supporting the paper as it is at the present. But what we'll ask is, if we support this group, if the decision is to support this group, will the cost of supporting it be able to be redeemed from government with the promise that they will redeem money to do with COVID-19 expenses? In which case, that's a completely different thing. So if it's to be expected that our reserves are to be used to fund this, I'm against it completely. So thank you, Leader.
I can't answer that. Muriel, you've got your hand up. Muriel.
Yes, thank you. Maybe it's the timing of this report coming, but there does seem to be substantially unanswered questions in it. The point that Councillor Fowle made about where we are focusing and any financial support that's appropriate, the issue of what other support these organisations are gaining from other sources, there just seems to be a lack of the precise information that we need to make a full support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Richard Jackson.
Richard Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I mean, just in response to Mike's query on whether this will be covered by government or not, truth is we don't know. It will be part of our Delta return. So we return every month what our costs are in full to government, and we await confirmation of what they're going to fund. We're not going to know in time to make this decision. We've got to do this because we've got to see those services continue, and we will do everything we can to get that money back from central government. And as I said, we're part of that return, and let's wait and see what we get. But we can't put this decision on hold because it's needed. Money there is needed right now.
Thank you. Any else, Bruce?
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. I find it a bit incredulous, really, the Labour point of view on this particular issue. I think they're sort of muddying the waters really here a bit. The fact of the matter is these are services that we used to provide as part and parcel of the County Council's provision of services to the electorate that we represent, and therefore I have no issue actually with supporting them through these difficult times. They are extraordinarily difficult times, and I think there is, for want of better terminology, clear blue water between these organisations and SMEs, as Kate has alluded to. So I will be supporting this paper.
Thank you. Samantha.
Thank you. Again, I am in support of this because I do feel that if we don't do this at this point, the cost to us will be a lot greater further down the road. I was at Rufford Abbey on Sunday, went there for a socially distanced picnic, which was lovely. It was my birthday, so we had a nice day. And it was nice to see everybody there. It was nice that people were adhering to the one-way route, and it'd be something awful if we lost an area like that. It's somewhere I use a lot, and I know that David Martin uses the home Pier Point location a lot, and the places that are really, really valuable to us. So I think offering them this support now will be the best in the long run. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other speakers? Well, I've reserved the right to speak. I'm going to let the mover of the motion to sweep up finally, but can I just point out under other options considered 21 on page 4, it is quite clear of what would happen if we didn't do this. The staff would be to be transferred back into the county council, so the county council would pick up the wages bill, and then a consequent procurement by any other contractor would take between 6 and 18 months. And can I remind you that these facilities would not be open probably for the rest of this year because of the virus, and so there would be no income from the county council. And so the county council would, one way or the other, have to take up the costs of running these places to keep them open, because you've all spoken very warmly about how useful they are and how much you like to go there with your families. And Samantha, happy birthday as well. But I think these are jewels in the crown of our county. And I know when we were peer reviewed, our peer reviewer was very impressed the fact we had so many green spaces that are looked after by the county council. So I'm going to support this, and like now please ask for John Cotty to see the proposal of the motion to wind it up. John.
Thank you, Leader. You've just made the points that I was going to make on the other options considered. I think Councillor Adair and Jackson basically took my speech away from me, so I'm not going to repeat through it all, but I was the Cabinet Member for Culture in 2009, and Councillor Adair is correct that it was over 1.1 million cost to us in our first year of that administration. And we've done what we've done to get the places run better, more facilities available, and also reduce that deficit to allow us to spend money on other things rather than supporting something that was costing the council a lot of money. I mean, Rufford Country Park was costing us over £500,000. So with an open book accounting system, which is what we're asking for, officers will be able to keep an eye on the money that we're supporting them with. And once the lockdown is complete and they can open up their cafes and shops, etc., in a proper manner and get people back in there, then the finances will be coming in again. We have to also remember that Home Pierpont was flooded in January, and so they were closed in January and February on limited running because they couldn't use the lake and they couldn't use the white water. And so they've had quite a bad year for income, virtually nothing. But they are, as you said earlier in the statement, that they are opening up the gym with distancing and doing what they can to open up to the public. So I've no problem in supporting this, and I thank you for the contribution made by members. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to put this to the vote. I've asked for all speakers, so again, counterintuitively, those against, please.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Councillor Peck, are you indicating against? Thank you, John. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against, Chairman.
Those abstaining? And those supporting the recommendations?
I think that's carried.
That's been carried. Thank you very much. Had a good debate. Now let's move on. Item 6 on the agenda. This is draft management accounts, which are full of detail here, and I'm going to hand this over for Councillor Richard Jackson to propose, as he's chairman of the Finance Accounts Committee. Richard Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I present today to Policy Committee the draft management accounts for 2019-2020. The report's compiled against a backdrop, obviously, of the emerging COVID-19 crisis. Central government allocated to the council £22 million of grant funding in the 2019-20 financial year, although right at the end of that year. So this has been transferred into reserve to fund COVID-19 related costs in this current financial year. We've set up a finance resilience group, which is established to consider the financial impact arising from the crisis and will report its findings back to senior leadership and members when appropriate, and we'll make sure that opposition members are included in that. Due to significant financial challenges facing the authority, particularly around the increased cost and demand for social care services, I have to report that there was an overspend of £4.2 million against committee budgets in 2019-20. This is in line with financial monitoring reports considered by Finance and Major Contracts Management Committee throughout the year. One of the main reasons for the overspend specifically relates to the increased numbers of looked after children that are coming into the system and to the increasing costs of looking after those vulnerable children. Table 1 in the report shows that there was a need to invest an additional £9.7 million in the Children and People's Committee. This was offset by net underspends of £5.5 million across other committees, as measures to mitigate spending were rolled out across all areas of the Council. Taking into account variances against central items, interest payments, capital charges and government grants, the total County Council overspend for the 19-20 financial year was just £13,000. As planned, the general fund balance will decrease by 2.1 million to 22 million at the end of the 19-20 financial year. And despite difficulties faced by the council, £120 million expenditure was invested into the capital programme during 2019-20. The majority of this expenditure related to school improvement projects and to providing additional school places, as well as investing in improving the condition of the county's highways infrastructure. The appendices to the report give further details on the draft 2019-20 outturn, the level of council reserves, allocations made from contingency and minor variations to capital programme. The report is the draft outturn for 2019-20 and the final figures will be confirmed at a future county council meeting. So Chairman, I move the recommendations. Happy to answer any questions that members may have either now or in writing.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that report and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Reg. Right, Alan, do you want to speak first? Or would you like your spokesman, Mike Pringle, to speak first?
Would you allow Mike to go first and I'll come in when Mike's spoken, please?
Yes, thank you. Right, Mike then, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Jackson, for offering the report. And again, thanks to Nigel and the finance team. Every single one of us recognises that there'll be a fluid change during this COVID crisis, and none of us can foresee what's going to happen in the future. So we need to be reactive. So, thanks for being as reactive as you have been with the finances previously. I think it's keen to highlight and emphasise that any change in circumstances should be immediately shared with all members openly. I think it's getting to that point now where all members need a direct contact from us. We recognise that savings that committees have made, we talk about it every month, Richard, every 6 weeks, and that's to be applauded. We also recognise that there is areas in which we need to probably address a little bit more or to understand and preempt any sort of to demand we possibly can. And that's not me. I'm sorry, that is not me, Bob.
I think that's Councillor Rhodes' dog.
It's the wife. The visitors are just so we do, we do need to respond to any demand, and we need to preempt or be in a position to predict better than what we are. Committees where demand increases suddenly, the 13 million that we've said in certain committees. However, the one thing that's imperative to me, and I know that you're going to talk about the Delta report again, Richard, is that government do make good their promise to pick up COVID expenses or COVID-related expenditure for the county, because I think that is we're just digging a hole that is going to be really difficult to dig out of. So I would like to see some guarantee, as you would, Richard, and I'm sure as we all would, to see some sort of guarantee, a return with this with the expenditure that council is facing at the minute. But in general, I do support the paper and thank Councillor Jackson and Nigel and the finance team for delivering this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now have Alan Rhodes next. Sorry, Alan.
Yes. Sorry about that brief interruption. Yeah, he was fast asleep till Mike started speaking. Yeah. It's usually the other way, Mike. Not not to add a lot to what Mike said. I mean, clearly, you know, the COVID-19 crisis is about to create a funding crisis for local government, and the recent report by Grant Thornton, commissioned by CCN this week, is clearly outlining the way that counties are going to be affected, and I think we're going to be affected probably worse than certainly the districts and boroughs, who I think are going to do relatively well out of it financially in some ways. So you know, I think, you know, certainly it'll be felt in the next year and for many years to come. I do hope that government hears our voice and recants a little bit on its previous position. I mean, it did say that it would do whatever needed to be done. That clearly is not going to be the case from what we're being told by the Minister now. And I do hope, Kay, that you'll speak to your beleaguered colleague, Mr. Jenrick, and ask him if he'll put pressure on the Treasury to consider the impact on counties of COVID-19, because it is severe. And it's going to affect the way that we operate and the level of service that we can deliver. And as I said earlier in this meeting when we were talking about another report, it's going to affect our aspirations for the future for a long time to come. And I think that's unfair, actually, on the people of Nottinghamshire. I think we all agree that this county and others have responded magnificently, but there's a cost to that. And it's a cost really that shouldn't be borne in the main by ourselves. I think government has to recognise the impact that that's going to have on us, and I do hope that, I sincerely hope when I say this, that you'll be putting pressure on Robert Jenrick to in turn pressure Treasury to recognise the impact of this crisis on our finances.
Thank you, Alan. I think there is no doubt about it. We shall be in a financial difficulty, and that's why it's important that we find as many savings as we can by running things differently. Can I now ask David Martin, please, speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And obviously, it is our role as opposition members to highlight issues that we feel aren't being carried out in the correct manner. And Councillor Lawton, you picked up earlier on that, and I wasn't criticising the way the council ran the scheme. It's just further extensions to how it was. But anyway, bearing in mind the financial crisis caused by coronavirus and the reduced funding from the government, does the leader think that it's now time to suspend the colossal building programme that we advocated earlier on this year, in especially highlighting the fact that part of the terms of reference of the COVID committee are government restructuring, and if you dissolve the district and borough councils, then you're going to have a lot of buildings lying around the county. So, you know, also as well, during the Smarter Working programme, we had a 25% increase in the output of staff members through the Smarter Working programme in the adult health and social care sector. So COVID has also highlighted technology, and we now have more staff working from home. So is it prudent to commit to £28 million worth of borrowed money when we have, you know, all these financial issues looming and facing us? I fail to see the logic behind the empire building while Rome burns.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I can't quite see where this is mentioned on the paper, but since you raise it, if you think about it just for a moment, we're going to be doing things differently, which probably means fewer staff in fewer buildings, which is why we're having a rationalisation programme. It's important that we get the buildings in the right place for the right reasons, because at the moment that isn't the case. So we're having a rationalisation programme. It's even more important we make those buildings to a very high standard that they can be as carbon neutral as possible, if not altogether. So far from the building programme being jettisoned, it might be changed. It's certainly not going to be jettisoned. I don't know the state of the council buildings. I'm sure I've been in most of them in my time as a councillor. I have to say they would probably not be in the right place for the right purpose. And that will be another decision for another day. But this council will be going forward with its building programme in order to deliver the services this county requires from the right buildings in the right place for the right number of people. as any sensible person would do. So anybody else like to speak to this paper? Right, well, Reg, you've reserved the right to speak. I'm going to be winding up now. Reg?
I've got really nothing further to add. I mean, these are the accounts for the year end 1920, and they're very well balanced out, and 2021 is going to be a different year, so I think we are taken to the vote and to the motion at the moment, the council.
Thank you. Right. Richard, is there anything else you wish to add to this?
Yeah, no, I think really we really ought to not lose sight of the fact that we've come within £13,000 of budget, and I think special congratulations should go to the finance team who've ensured that that's been the case. It's been a very, very challenging financial year, even before COVID came along, so that's worthy of note. Let that go without being said. Yeah. I mean, all that I would say is we can't let the current crisis get in the way of the ambitions we've got for the whole county of the transforming the county council. You know, we're coming through this now, and there are a lot of some other things that we need to do. We do need to get back to business as usual, as much as we need to keep a very, very close check on the COVID issue, and that's what I think we've got to start moving back towards. I think government would say, quite rightly, they have put £1,000 extra into local government in the last couple of months, which is absolutely unprecedented. And we'll keep arguing the case that we need more. One of the problems is that there are a number of authorities who are over-egging the pudding. And so are claiming a great deal more in additional costs or reduced expenditure, reduced income than might actually be the case. And it's clouding the issue when it gets to Treasury and to DCLG. Credit to our finance team and to Nigel in particular. We're playing it with an absolutely straight bat, and we're given a completely accurate picture of what our real costs are in this. And if a few others around the country would do the same, I think there would be a clearer, more easily understandable picture for central government, and we might get the funding that we need sooner. At the end of the day, they're dealing with an enormous amount of public money, and it's only right that they need to really dive very deeply into the figures that other councils are sending to them and make sure that you know, all this is real. We expect this to be an answer to other councils' underlying financial problems, who might just suddenly think this is a kind of Christmas come early and an opportunity to try and get in additional money. So we'll continue to play it straight, and I think sooner or later we'll be rewarded for that.
Thank you. Right, so I'm now going to put it to the vote. You've all had the recommendations in front of you. All those against, please show.
Councillor Fold, if you could turn your camera on, it would help. I can't see you. Thank you. So at the moment, Chair, I can see no indications against. Can I make a correction to the last vote, please? I think I said there were 5 votes against, and Sarah Almond, who is clearly paying much more attention at school in the mathematics lessons, has reminded me that there were 6 votes against. So there are no votes against on this one.
Let's count at 5 then, Anthony.
Knotting their fingers on one hand. So are there any abstentions for this? Right, then I'm going to Chief Executive, that's carried then, isn't it? Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on now to agenda item 7 then. This is the under 16 home to school transport policy and post 16 transport policy statement for the academic year 2021. And I'm going to ask John Cotty to please introduce this as it's under his name on this committee, and then Philip Owen to second it. So John Cotty.
Thank you, Leader. This is our annual policy document for transport to school for the academic year 2020 to 2021. There are 2 minimal changes to the policy. One is to amend the policy to make it clearer for parents and carers which elements of the policy are statutory and which are discretionary, and also to amend Appendix B to reflect the changes that have occurred in education with regards to those young people who are being educated out of school at an alternative education provision. So those are the 2 slight amendments. The policies are compliant with local authorities' statutory duties, which have not changed. However, it's important to note that during this time, Transport and Travel Services are revising operational practices to meet the additional guidance provided by the government during the coronavirus crisis, with regards to transport and education. Transport and Travel Services continue to work with the DFT, Children and Families Department, schools, colleges, parents and carers to provide the appropriate travel solutions. So the recommendation is on page 57 or 3 of this particular report, and it's to recommend that committee approves the under 16 home to school transport policy and the post 16 transport policy statement for the 2021 academic year. So I'm happy to propose that recommendation, Leader. Thank you.
And I will formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. John Peck. Alan, did you want to come in first?
Yeah, but again, let John go first. I have got something that I want to add, but yeah.
Right, John Peck. Lost you, John.
No, got it. Yes, thank you, Chair. We're happy to support this. It's an annual report, as John Cotty said, with minor amendments, which we're happy to support. So little more to add to that. We did mention school transport earlier on today, and I think we need to come back to that issue because that is going to be, as was said, a significant difficulty to manage over the coming months as children return to school. So something we'll have to come back to, but happy to support this today.
Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, yes, John's absolutely correct. I mean, we are supportive, obviously, of the report, but there is that elephant in the room, if you like, about what happens with school transport post COVID crisis, and what will happen with on school transport in terms of social distancing. Will children be expected to wear masks? Who's going to be responsible for policing and monitoring that? Who's responsible for issuing the masks? There are all sorts of logistical concerns around this. And to be honest, I agree with you. I want to see kids go back to school when it's safe to do so, but it won't be safe to do so until we've addressed these issues. I have raised it with Gary Wood because actually a constituent, a concerned parent, raised it with me. And until we can instill some confidence in parents that their children will be safe to travel on our transport and that all the appropriate measures will be in place, then to be honest, I don't think that many of them won't take that option. Gary told me that they were still waiting for government guidance. Well, it's time that guidance was given to us, if that's what we're still waiting for now, today. I must admit it was over a week ago that I spoke with Gary, but we do need to get that guidance out to schools, and they in turn need to get that guidance out to parents to give them some confidence and peace of mind that once their children start travelling back to school on school transport, it's going to be safe to do so, and that all the necessary provisions will be in place. Thank you for that, Kay.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Could I ask, is there an officer in the room, I'll come back to you, David, who can answer the question on face coverings? As my understanding is, it doesn't have to be a mask, it has to be a covering, bandana or scarf, for example. But is there anybody in the room who can answer that question that's just been posed by Alan? When are we going to get the guidance?
So Derek Higton.
Derek.
Thank you, Leader. The government issued the guidance at the very end of last week to come into operation this week. So we received the guidance on Sunday and implemented it on Monday. The guidance is that school children travelling to school on school transport aren't required to wear face coverings or face masks. So that makes the logistics easier for us to manage. But of course, we still have to manage the social distancing implications on school transport. In terms of actual take-up, Councillor Owen mentioned earlier on that the numbers of young people accessing educational provision is relatively low at the moment, and we're seeing that is also the case in our school transport arrangements as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Right, David Martin. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I know it's an annual report, and it says that in the report there are no changes to be implemented this year, other than the changes that were implemented the other year, whereby the increase in cost was 17% last year, and it's going to be another 17% this year, and that was set in a Communities in Place committee last year before the COVID pandemic. So my question is a rhetorical question: would it not be more compassionate to defer this year's increase on the grounds of compassion, because it's going to be more difficult for these people to get to the education that they are trying to access, because it feels a bit like an indirect tax on learning, you know? And I think this September, when children really start going back to school, is when we should be helping them. And could this not be considered as part of the COVID impact?
I think that's rather an extraordinary suggestion. Would anybody like to take that up? Richard Jackson, would you like to say anything about the cost of travel?
Yeah, we had a working group look at this some time ago, and the problem was that it hadn't been increased for a very long time. I think it was something like 8, 9, 10 years. And so this is only, the increases that Councillor Martin talks about was only to bring this up to where it, actually a bit less than where it would have been had there just been normal inflationary increases over that period. So it was getting to the point where it was unaffordable to do it with such a subsidy. This was just bringing it back to a kind of cost recovery position, which I think was the right thing to do at the time.
There we are, got your answer. Anybody else like to speak? No? Right, well, I'm now going to ask Philip Owen, please, whether he wishes to speak as a seconder. Philip?
No, thank you, Leader. I don't think there's anything else to add to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you wish to add, John? John Cotty?
No, it's okay. Let's go to the vote. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Right, I'm now going to put it to the vote then. Is there anyone against the paper?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no members showing against.
Are there any abstentions?
None that I can see.
Thank you. Therefore, this is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on then now to item 8 on the agenda. This is the update of the work on the D2N2 Local Enterprise Partnership with the Midlands Engine Partnership. D2N2, of course, is the organisation to which public funding is handed in order to choose schemes which are then handed back to various councils to enact. So report seeks approval to make the financial contributions to both Derby, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire Local Enterprise Partnership and the Midlands Engine Partnership for this financial year. Nottinghamshire County Council remains committed to playing a full role in working with businesses through both partnerships. To this end, and outlined in the paragraphs 4 and 13 of the report, we have representation of the various boards relating to the operation of both partnerships. Those involved take an active role in ensuring that they are a cohesive approach in terms of attracting investment and stimulating economic growth. As a strategic authority, I'm sure members know how valuable it is to have representation on key partnerships. This has so far helped encourage a joined-up approach and provide a stronger democratic accountability. And for those of you who are watching it being streamed, this is part of the duties of the council. It is not a paid position. I formally recommend move the recommendations, which are on page 98 of the agenda pack. And I'm now going to ask for a seconder, please. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second the proposal and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Reg. And it's now open for debate. Alan, for your group.
Yeah, just a little grumble, really. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm supportive of our remaining part of these partnerships. They are important in the longer term. But I spoke to Anthony about this yesterday. Midlands Connect. I saw on social media, on Twitter, actually, they launched their 2.7 billion access to totem study, which, you know, is what it is. And yet, you know, the map that they showed had Nottingham, Derby, Leicester and no points in between. It did actually go up as far as Mansfield on the map this time, which is credit to them. I used to tell them when I was leader of the council that there was life north of Hucknall. but they've now at least acknowledged Mansfield. But after Mansfield, there's just a black arrow that says Chesterfield and the North. I mean, so Newark doesn't exist anymore. Worksop, Retford, Harworth, all of those towns north of Mansfield are insignificant to Midlands Disconnect. And are we really saying to those residents, those ratepayers, that there is no benefit to them from there being an HS2 station in Towton? I mean, that's if HS2 happens at all now, of course. We're on our way into a recession. So, you know, I think the big question mark over the future of HS2, Philip will be delighted to know. It's disappointing, let's say that. It's disappointing to those of us that live in the north of the county that that Midlands Connect doesn't recognise any of those communities north of Mansfield in its literature. I think it's clumsy, to say the least. That's my little rant over, but I did think that I should take the opportunity to express my disappointment about that.
Well, I have to say I'm carrying on in the tradition there, because I complain about exactly the same thing. I think it should be coast to coast, frankly, or coast to the Welsh border. Yeah. Any other speakers, please?
David Martin.
David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the Midlands Engines is a bit of an anomaly. It's a bit of a frustrating talk shop, and that's what Alan's trying to say, I believe, because it's a big body. It encompasses a large area, and some of the peripheral areas do get left out. You know, especially issues like really the electrification of the Midland Main Line, because that's crucial, really. I mean, if we're not going to get HS2 as a result of any pandemic-caused recession, then really the electrification of the Midland Main Line is definitely crucial. I welcome the hub at Towton, don't get me wrong, and I'm all for HS2. It doesn't really impact on my residents in our area. In fact, it brings benefits, because the Main Line connectivity through from Mansfield through to Towton will be excellent news for us here in Ashfield. And long may, you know, it's been on the cards for a long time, and everything to do with railways is always on the cards for a long time, you know. But public spending in the East Midlands is 50% of that, of those people in the West Midlands, and there has to be a redressing of that balance. And this chamber is the only chamber that can help project that financial imbalance. So I do welcome that, although it feels to the ordinary layman, if I went down the road on Mansfield Road and said to some of my residents, what do you think about the Midland Engine? They'd look at me as if I was some kind of alien landing from Mars, you know. And the disconnectivity there, the lack of information with general members of the public about what the Midland Engine does, feels to me a bit like what happens in Downing Street sometimes doesn't happen in Nottingham. Just like what happens in Nottingham doesn't happen in Kirkby. Just the same kind of distraction and lack of information. And I think members ought to have a little bit more information from the County Council, if that's possible, about what the Midlands Engine is trying to do and what it's trying to achieve, you know, because, and I say this because at the moment we have the Housing and Communities and Local Government Minister as part of that. So if we can't achieve something while we've got that kind of person on the committee, what hope is there?
Thank you. Anybody else? I've got Bruce next and Richard Jackson after that. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate. Kate, as anybody that's been around since the setup of the LEP, one of my criticisms on the setup was the lack of representation from on SMEs. I'm sort of following on a little bit really from what Kate was having to say. I think it's essential that the LEP now sort of morph themselves and start to be a little bit more proactive as far as helping SMEs and those industries which have been seriously affected by the crisis. I think some of it can also be helped by trying to streamline their activities to be able to disseminate and get money to where it's most needed as quickly as possible. I do think that you know, we need to take a lesson from history here. You know, after the Second World War, the first thing that was the thing that really brought us out of the difficulties was well, one of the things was starting a house building program, a massive council house building program, and it sort of invigorated the economy. And I think we have a responsibility as councillors and councils to be able to assist in that as far as the recovery is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard Jackson. Richard Jackson.
Apologies, I was muted. Yeah, thank you, Kate. Just really on Alan's point that the North is forgotten, I share his frustration that it's not in this paper, but it is in every meeting I've been to that's discussed HS2 and Towton. And I think it is important, and he's quite right. And it may be a little comfort to him to know that it is being discussed. I don't know why it's overlooked in this paper. I mean, it's probably unrealistic to think you're going to travel from Worksop to Towton to then travel onwards to London. It would be slower than travelling directly on the East Coast Main Line. But obviously, we do want people from the north of the county to be able to travel for the 10,000 or so jobs that we're expecting to be created around the HS2 station. So it is very important. More widely on the LEP, I've been on the investment board for 6 months or so, so I see what's going through that, and I have to say it's not how I would choose to set it up, but we work with it as it is, and it is doing a lot of good, and it is bringing in investment into Nottinghamshire. One of the things though that frustrates me, and it's not quite in my patch, it's in Councillor Foles, is the Boots access road, which has been built and completed a long time now. During this lockdown, when we were allowed out for an hour a day, I actually went and walked the length of it and back just to see if the rumours were true, that it's completely finished, that the street lights are there and working and everything else, and it is. Before we went into lockdown, we had all sorts of issues around Clifton Bridge and the closures there. This would help with traffic. It would unlock a bit of a bottleneck, and it's enormously frustrating that public money's gone into that road to unlock some development. The development is stalled, but the road is finished. And for me, I'm almost tempted to go down there and move the cones that are keeping it closed, because it would be a benefit to people, particularly down in Beeston Rylands and in the south of Beeston more widely. And quite why it's not open, I've no idea. And I'd ask again that we can put some more pressure on the LEP to get that open.
And was this built by D2N2 public money, Richard?
Yes, it was. And from memory, it's £5 million, but I might be wrong.
Yeah. Is there an officer? Sorry, is there an officer who can make any mention about this?
I was just going to respond to Richard. I understand the reason why the road isn't open.
Richard, Kate, just a moment. Please come through the chair. I'll ask you to call in a moment. I'm just going to ask, are there any officers in the room who could explain why this road is closed? Adrian, are you present?
Yes, thanks, Kay. So as Councillor Jackson says, the road is now complete. The last step that needs to be taken for it to be opened is its final clean, and then the Harris fencing can be removed, and we're just negotiating for its safe opening, trying to pick an appropriate day of the week based around kind of traffic flows to get both the clean and the fencing removed, and then it'll be open. So it's imminent.
When you say imminent, is this next week or is it sort of next month?
It's imminent.
I should go down with the broom.
Very diplomatic. Kate, would you like to come in now?
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. No, I was just going to say what Adrian's just said, and it's been imminent now for about the last year. I just thought I'd mention that, but I think it is quite close. I understand there was an issue about some anti-skid material on the roundabout or something, but I have a resident that asks me every week, so I've been passing that on, and I understand that it's more imminent than it has been for the past year, I understand, but we'll see. Thank you.
Dare I say, from my prejudiced point of view, if this was a county council road, it would have been open long ago. Are there any other speakers do we have on this item? John Peck. Sorry, I missed your hand. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'd only just put it up. As we've spent a fair bit of time discussing railways, I mean, I must say I've been something of an HS2 sceptic myself over the years, and it does remain to be seen whether it does actually happen. But just as with the north of the county, I think over our end of the county, and I don't quite classify us as north, we're somewhere in the middle. I think we seem to have been forgotten in all of this to some extent when it comes to railways. So I do want to take the opportunity of just reminding councillors, including John Cotty, the chairman of the committee, about the Robin Hood line, because that has gone quiet over recent times, not surprisingly, perhaps, considering the state that we're in at the moment. But I do just want to take this opportunity of dropping in a word about the Robin Hood line, because it has understandably gone quiet at the moment. But I do hope that as we come out of this, John will be pushing very hard for the business case that has been promised to be brought forward at the earliest opportunity. Because I think that HS2 notwithstanding, I think it's very important from a railways point of view that really the concentration of funding over the coming years is to improve electrification, as David Martin mentioned, connectivity east-west. Many of our big cities are not connected very well, particularly east-west, but also the local branch lines like the Robin Hood line, which can be opened with ease, a cheap as chips project in railway terms that could be done very, very quickly and easily compared to other major projects. So I do hope that John will continue to push this, because it has gone rather quiet in recent times, understandably, as I have said, but I will continue to raise the point, as I'm sure my colleague Mike Pringle from Ollerton will do as well. Thank you.
Do I have any other speakers? Can I say, if you look at the yellow papers, I'm not sure how many have got the papers, there is a map on there, so I think I've been more effective than you have, Alan, in my complaining. It actually shows the coast, Skegness, Grimsby, and Immingham docks are on there. Hold Beach, Boston, Lincoln, Newark, Grantham. They're all on this map. It's perhaps not the best map altogether, but can I say that I'm chairman of the Totem board? It's a very good board meeting. We have all councillors involved, city, county, and everyone involved with this. And we have a well worked up programme for the Totem station, which also shows the HS2 line, if you like, kept. It's been a line which is on the ground, will be kept on the ground till HS2 comes. Last week I had the opportunity of talking to my colleague, leader of Leeds City Council, Judith, and also I'm regularly in touch with Trish Gilby in Chesterfield. And I'm afraid to say that all we three ladies are in favour of the HS2 line, because we can see the economic benefits of it, and we are working in concert together. And it's not a competition between East and West, it's all together. But going back to the Midlands Engine, I also sit on the board for the Midlands Engine. I always fight our corner there. I think we've been instrumental in getting the A1 up the agenda, because the A1 serves, of course, the eastern side of Nottinghamshire, and more closely to some of your patches than mine. It was about 20 miles through Nottinghamshire, though. And we're now looking at the A52, particularly from Bingham to Grantham, because this would make a connection between the A46, the A52 and the A1, because all of these are strategic roads. So the Midlands Engine are well sighted on all these things, but of course it's not just about the East Midlands, it's also about the West Midlands. And if you look across the whole of the area, this is the part of the country which is going to regenerate the rest of the country, because this is where we make things, this is where we do things. And you can start with JCB, if you like, in the West Midlands, who also have factories in Wrexham, I understand, right across to Jaguar Land Rover in Birmingham. We have Bombardier and Rolls-Royce and Toyota in Nottinghamshire, have a multiplicity of small businesses with big components for this. And this is where I think is a good opportunity for this council to push the agenda of joining up across the country with our colleagues in the West Midlands to, if you like, fight our cause a bit better against the southern part of England, which has had more investment. And so you may be well assured I always sing up to whenever I go. And East Midlands councils, of course, have been quite instrumental in this. So I think it has been fairly effective. And I am going to claim credit for the nap, Alan, because I said made exactly the same points you did. I can't even see the coast on this. But there it is in the yellow pages there. It's a high-level discussion document, as you might imagine. But don't imagine for one moment that all the partners in on this, the universities, our business partners, the leaders of councils, are all pushing in the same direction. And with a good deal of persuasion of government, I think we shall win in the end. So this report was introduced, or by me as it looks like. Reg, did I ask you if you wanted to say anything?
No.
Would you like to?
Yes. Why not? Everybody else has had to go.
Right.
I mean, obviously we've got to support this and support Midlands Engine and all the rest of it. But the thing that we really need to question going forward about the purpose of D2N2 and where that's going to take us and what we're going to do with that. Because I think that, to me, I go and sit in meetings there and I might, you're just like there, they've sort of, you're hived off as an elected member and all these bureaucrats are there, they've sorted it all out before they ask you for your opinion and then they tell you you're wrong and they're right. So I think D2N2 and the monies and the fundings that they do, I think will be much better supported and looked after and much more better invested in our communities if it was done through elected members and not through bureaucrats. So I think that's a question for the future and that's a question for government as well. But other than that, I support the recommendations and we need to keep them alive to get there.
Shall we just refresh the recommendations are that we approve a financial contribution to the Derby-Derbyshire Nottinghamshire Local Enterprise Partnership of £62,500 for the coming financial year. That's 2020-21, as required to be subscribed by the Finance and Major Contracts Management Committee for this allocation, and approves the financial contribution to the Midlands Engine for Growth and Economic Development Initiatives budget of £20,000 for this financial year. So it's 62,500 for D2N2 and it's £20,000 for the Midlands Engine. So I'm going to now put that to the vote. And again, I'm going to ask for anyone against.
There are no indications against, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any abstentions?
None that I can see.
Then I'm going to declare that unanimously carried, and thank you very much for the debate on that. We now come to item 9 on the agenda. It's the use of the urgency procedures. That's on pages 111 to 114 if you're looking at those pages. So I propose that we accept the urgency procedures. I don't think there's much to add to this. I think they were taken by the Chief Executive or the correct officer at the right time for the right reasons. And I'm now going to ask for a seconder on this before I put it to the debate. So do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah. I second the report and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. I've got one hand up already. Just let me ask Alan if he'd like to come in first, Bruce. Alan, is there anything you wish to say?
No, I've nothing to add to this report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Bruce and then Philip Owen then.
Thank you very much, Kay. This is really, I'm just really highlighting the subject more than anything else. And it has obviously taken a back seat considering what we've just been through, and there's nobody, as you well aware, been more affected than what I have over the COVID. But in my area and many other areas, we do have flood victims, and they haven't gone away, and they are still impacted by the devastating effects of the floods. I mean, again, actually, this council proved its mettle by setting up this hardship fund quickly and efficiently, and distributing funds to those people that really need it, apart from one slight problem in Newark. But it was most welcome. But I'm just flagging it up while I've got the senior officers' ears within this group, that they haven't gone away. They are still in difficulty, and they still require assistance to be able to get back to some form of normality. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anybody else like to speak to this? I've got Philip Owen and then Glyn Guilfoyle.
Yes, thank you, Leader. paragraph 8, the urgent decision taken regarding the 300,000 for early years funding, members may be interested to know that that money enabled 139 early years settings to remain open during the Easter holidays. It helped 416 children access childcare during Easter, of which 370 places were for children of critical workers and 46 for vulnerable children. 35 children were found alternative childcare provision for the Easter holidays with the support and funding from the County Council. In total, there were 22,000 hours of childcare during the Easter break. The same model was applied to the half-term spring bank holiday, and the funds that remain will be used to try and have a similar scheme during the summer holiday period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Glyn next and then David Martin.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Bruce said regarding the flooding, I mean, it hasn't gone away. And last night, in particular in my area, we had flash flooding and properties affected. In fact, they've had sandbags delivered today. I've just had a call whilst during this meeting that someone else has had their property flooded and wants sandbags because they're very worried. So it hasn't gone away. And my concern is that, and it isn't as serious. Well, it is as serious to those who were affected. Luckily, no lives were lost. But the fact that we've got a COVID committee, I still think that we should have had a smaller group of people looking at the response to flooding, because I don't think that some of the Environment Agency and some of the other agencies are really getting their act together on this. And, you know, it really does need some work on. And my only other comment would be just to welcome back, as I know the Chief Executive did, the children's centres back into the County Council's realm, and the staff.
Thank you, Ben. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to finish off by saying I would like to congratulate the senior leadership team on the excellent way in which they've managed the County Council's affairs during this COVID pandemic, and I'm sure the members of the public will appreciate everything that they've done. And we know that these issues are still there, the flooding and the children's issues, they're all still there, and yet the Council's leadership team have been particularly good at handling all of them. I'd particularly like to thank Anthony May for his little videos supporting the staff, because I thought they were quite funny. It reminded me of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4. Thank you very much, Anthony. Your support, I'm sure, has been appreciated by all your staff. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Do I have any other speakers, please? Can I just, for the sake of clarity, the agenda items we're talking about are the Flood Hardship Fund, the Coronavirus Short-Term Refocusing of Council Activity, the disposal of land at Deanwood Crescent, again the Flood Hardship Fund, early years funding for private and voluntary independent sector childcare, and the domestic abuse temporary emergency accommodation, which no one's spoken about that, but of course that must make a huge difference if those people are involved with it. So I'm now going to put this to the vote. Reg, I haven't asked you again, have I? You're not next to me to nudge me today.
No,
Reg?
no, nothing further to add.
Thank you. So I'm now going to put this to the vote. Is there anyone against this report?
No one that I can see, Chairman.
Thank you. Any abstentions?
None that I can see.
Thank you. That is then unanimously carried, and thank you for that. We now come to the part of the agenda which is for the exclusion of the public. The public be excluded for the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that the discussions are likely to involve disclosure of exempt information described in Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act of 1972, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And we will pause for a moment whilst we get the electronics in the right place. Do I have a second for that proposal, Reg?
Yes, I second that and reserve the right on it. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Mrs. Coach, we just need the vote on it, and then we can move to
suspending the recorder.
I do beg your pardon, Keith. I think we're going to do anyone against, actually, Glyn. So anyone against moving to the no.
There's no one.
No.
Well,
Right.
we voted, Chair, just for clarity, we voted against the main paper, so we're obviously not in favour of the confidential paper.
No, I'm just taking the vote, Alan, on whether we, because Keith reminded me, I haven't accepted the vote on item 10 for exclusion of the public. So
Sorry.
we're going to come back to the main paper. You'll get another chance.
Sorry, confused. Beg your
No,
pardon.
I confused you. My apologies.
I think the public will be confused and would have left by now. So I think we can probably move on.